Okay, let's start putting this thing back together, and we're going to start with the front variable speed pulley assembly, which was the middle layer that we were talking about. This assembly has two bearings. They are 60-10 bearings, and what we are using is seal bearings with the rubber seal around them. Reason being, this area doesn't get any lubrication. A sealed bearing is pre-lubricated for life. Now, what the life of the bearing is, we don't know, but it is pre-lubricated and it's sealed. It's got the rubber gasket around it. Alright, this first bearing we're going to put in is the bottom one. And I'm going to start by tapping the bearing into the carrier. We use a lot of hammers, but I wasn't wanking on that, so I wasn't pounding on it that hard. Anyhow, okay, now we got to get this guy in here, and for that we're going to go over to the press again. Okay, we're over at the press. By the way, I'm using this as an arbor press. It does have hydraulic capability, but we don't need it for any of this stuff. So general purpose arbor press works fine for most of this stuff. The first thing we're going to do is put this on the bottom of the pulley. It's very important to get it oriented right. It is oriented like that, with the round part at towards this end of the pulley, or sticking out, whatever, and it's just pressed on this onto this shaft. I'm going to start out with a solid block just to get it going. When you press, try and keep things lined up so it's straight. Once we get it down that far, we've got to switch to something that's going to go over the inner part. When you're pressing a bearing, always put all the pressure on the race that is actually pressed onto whatever it is. Don't press on the outer thing. You don't want to put stress on the bearing. So that happens to fit. Go figure. Exactly. Once again, I'm going to stack things up because although this press is adjustable up and down, we'd be doing that constantly. It's sort of a pain. So this works. Press that down until it's all the way on. It should look like that. It should be a little bit below the edge of the pulley, and it should be oriented like this, and that's super important. You'll just have to do it all over again. Okay, the next thing we're going to put on is this little ring. It's a spacer ring. It's incredibly important. It actually serves to keep the timing belt aligned. Now we're ready for the shaft. Now the shaft has a keyway in here, and we're going to have to very carefully line it up. Put our key in there. And then we're going to press this things to do it. And notice I've got these blocks have a hole in them, so that's what I'm doing. So the shaft can go all the way through. Alright. This can be a little bit hard to get lined up. quite as pretty as in the ads for presses, but it's in there. And the thing we want to check right now is that the groove for our snap ring on this side is just level with the top of the pulley. And it is. So let's go back over to the other table. Okay. Why do I say that so much? The next thing we want to do is put the snap ring back on it. That simply goes over here. I'm going to get it started, and then this is totally flush with that, so we're going to hopefully tap the ring down, and you can see where it snapped in. Well, I could, you probably couldn't. Anyhow, very sure all the way in the way. Many things you want to check. One of them is that the tangs on the snap ring should come back real close together. We want to make absolutely sure that thing is in that groove. And it is. Okay, we're ready to put this assembly back on the frame. I want to point out the brake in these things is pretty rugged, overbuilt. The only failures I've really ever seen with these brakes is when somebody twisted too hard on the handle, probably with a pipe wrench, and they sheared this little roll pin that holds the cam onto the end of the brake shaft. And in this case, that's exactly what they did. There's the old one, and we're going to replace that. One indicator you'll find is if the handle goes up like this, you can still pull it out. Anyhow, that causes the cam will just rotate on there and it doesn't work. So we're going to put that back in. We're going to stick a roll pin in here. And we just pound it in. Okay, to reassemble this, we've already reassembled the pulley. Going to put the brake shells in. These are symmetrical. It really doesn't matter what way they go in, but some of them have these little countersinks on the bottom where the spring holes are. Put those down. Another way, if you're able, you can put the labels up. Put the springs in there. These springs get mutilated. Make sure that the springs, if they don't have the hooks on the end, nice hooks, then go ahead and replace them, because they'll pop out and make a bounce. So we'll put the springs on both of the brake shoes, and hold the entire thing. What we want to do is just put it around this post in the middle. And while we're doing that, put the spring back in. In case you've noticed, there's a lot of juggling going on. The operators seat it down in there, and again you can see how the brake works. It's pretty simple and straightforward. Okay, so once you've got the brake shoes in there, everything looks good. The springs are in their holes well. Everything's seated. We're going to go ahead and stick this in. I want to point out something. This bearing holder has a flat side. Occasionally you'll see a flat side on both sides, but normally it's just on one side. That flat side has to be on this side, pointing towards the spring that's next to the post. If you turn it around, The non-flat side is going to crush that spring. It won't seat in there. Another thing along the same lines is be very careful when you put this in. Everything should go in. Don't force anything. Make sure there's no dirt in the area where it goes in. And be very careful to seat this. If this gets cocked or anything stops that thing bolting down, you're going to break this bearing retainer, and that's not a good thing. They crack really, really easy. So we want to make sure that this goes all the way into the bore, sits down in there well, and we're going to turn it over. So you get it in there. It should spin freely. You might have to work it a little bit and juggle it around. Nothing should be forced. And the bolts should screw in all the way by hand. If it's all the way down. Helps if you can hold on to your wrench. Now before I tighten those, I'm going to once again turn it, make sure it spins freely, and that it's seated in there. And go ahead and tighten them down. It seems simple, but there's a little bit of finagling in order to get this guy seated in there properly. Once again, as I constantly say, don't crank on the bolts until you can't possibly put any more pressure on them. Most people will tighten bolts more than they need to be tightened, and it just leads to more failures. It's just got to have enough torque in order to do its job. Anyhow, that's the center section. Now, we're going to put the top pulley together. Again, this is a 60-10 sealed bearing. Now, the way I normally like to do this is press that one on. It's a press fit there, it's a press fit in here. Whichever way you do it. I'm going to press this one on, and then I'm going to press this on top of it, violating my rule of pressing against what's not supporting what you're pressing against. But anyhow, the other way is you can put this in there and press it in until it's flat. Let's go to the press. Here we are at the press. I'm going to put this bearing on first. I'm going to take something that will go right around that. This is actually a piece of muffler pipe. I think it was a 2-inch pipe. And we're going to press that bearing on. Let me pile enough stuff up here to do it. And that's that. And that bearing should be seated all the way down to the bottom. Now we're going to put the outer collar on it. Now I want to get it started first. And in order to do that, threaded straight. Get it? You can tell it's straight because you should have an equal clearance around here. Once I get it started, I'm going to start the process of getting it all the way on. Yeah, I probably should break down and make some tools just for this, but got a little bit more with that. Then I'm going to put a ring, it's just a piece of pipe that fits over those ears. And the only thing I have big enough to press on that, and we'll continue going now. Okay, once you're done with that, you look at it, the collar should be down about 1/4 of an inch from the top of it. It should be even with the bottom of the bearing, all the way down there straight. Should have equal clearance around here, and of course it should rotate okay. And we should really make the proper tools to do this. The proper way to do it would be to press it into the collar first, and then have something along the line of our muffler pipe that would fit down through the little hole and press the bearing on it. But it works, and nobody's bothered to find the right size tubing yet to fit down in there. So we do it that way, and we manage to make it work. Okay, back to the table. Finally, we're going to slide our movable pulley on here. I will show you how to replace the bushings at some point. A lot of them need the bushings replaced. Fortunately, this one didn't. It's pretty solid on there. Slide that on there, and we got another wonderful snap ring. It goes on the top, and in that groove right there. And that snap ring is really, come out of there. That snap ring is to stop the top bearing. Remember, there's a bearing on the top of this that actually goes up through the top of the thing. Again, it's a sealed bearing. That's what we're going to put on once we reassemble the mill. These are all sealed bearings because there is no lubrication in this area. So, and that's it. That's the middle section. Yippee!